Hello all you Spartans and welcome to another video of mine. Well, we had Kratos wrapping up a lot of things in the God of War Ragnarok Valhalla DLC. He went up against Tyr a number of times, he fought his inner demons, and he also got to find out a lot of things about himself. But where does the Ghost of Sparta go now? Valhalla DLC might have scratched that itch, but the Leviathan still hungers for adventure. So grab your blades of chaos, climb aboard the Draugr's boat, and let's sail the seas of speculation as we are about to find out where our hero, Kratos, might go for the next installment in the God of War franchise. Let's get started, folks. The biggest clue that you can get about where Kratos might be heading in the next installment, or installments, so to speak, would be from his battles with Tyr. Now, the weapons that Tyr uses is something that you should definitely take a note of because they come from various mythologies from all over the world. Let's start with the very first weapon that Tyr uses when he goes up against Kratos, the shield and spear. Now, a lot of people might think that the shield and spear actually comes from Greek, but hey, what I would say here is forget any Grecian myths because what Tyr uses, that is the shield and the spear, is forged in the very spirit of the Norse. In fact, Viking warriors carried these tools of war with pride, and their god wasn't any different. In the face of Ragnarok's darkness, Tyr leads the charge, his spear piercing the shadows. Yet he's not just a brutal berserker like a shield, a symbol of law and order. Tyr wields both offense and defense with measured control. His spear dances between attack and justice, reflecting the duality of this complex war god. Tyr, in this case, was most definitely depicted wielding both a spear and a shield in Norse mythology and art, and these weapons were central to his image as the god of war, law, and justice. And there are evidences for Tyr using the shield and the spear because throughout Norse artifacts and art like carvings and sagas, Tyr is consistently shown with a shield and a spear. These weapons are as crucial to his portrayal as his one hand, a sacrifice that he made to bind Fenrir, and his helmet. And there are texts like the Poetic Edda and Prose Edda which consistently describe Tyr as a warrior and champion of justice, wielding a shield and spear. He is often called shield bearer and spear god. There have also been symbolic meaning surrounding the usage of shield and spear because it's represented different aspects of Tyr's domain. The shield symbolized defense, law, and order, while the spear signified attack, justice, and war. Their combination embodied Tyr's multifaceted role as a protector, warrior, and upholder of law. So while Tyr might have employed other weapons in specific situations, the shield and spear were his defining tools. They were not just weapons, they were visual markers of his identity and multifaceted roles. Therefore, you can confidently say that Tyr was not only a wielder of the shield and spear, but also their most iconic champion in Norse mythology and art. And therefore, we should not get confused when we see the shield and spear being used by Tyr in this case when he goes up against Kratos, because some people might think that, okay, the shield and spear exists because of the previous few games where we had the Greek mythology. And that's why right at the beginning I mentioned that you should forget about any Grecian myths because a shield and a spear is not just used in the Greek mythology but also in Norse mythology. I spoke about the symbolic meaning, the literary descriptions, and also depictions which clearly show Tyr using the shield and the spear. So you had the Nordics or the Norse mythology depicting Tyr as the shield bearer or the one using the spear. So it takes the present, not the past games, the present game where we had the Norse mythology. So that's like the first place that Tyr starts off when he battles against Kratos, which is the present. Again, not the past, but the present, because the present deals with the Norse mythology. And now, his other three battles in Valhalla DLC could probably tell us where he's going in the future. So we've had the past, which was Greek. We now have the present, which is clearly showcased using the shield and the spear. And now the next few weapons could be an indicator as to where the next installment or installments, plural, might be going. So let's stick around and find out what this video has to offer more. The second weapon that Tyr is shown as using is the Makwa Whittle. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. So, there's no definitive archaeological evidence depicting Buluk Chaptan, which is the, you could say, the Mayan god of war, specifically wielding the Makwa Whittle. Now, there are strong reasons to believe that it was his weapon of choice because there is like this symbolic connection. Now, Buluk Chaptan served as the Mayan god of war, and the Makwa Whittle was the preferred weapon of Mayan warriors. Its brutal efficiency and association with sacrifice perfectly align with his domain. Now, first of all, the depictions of gods are rare in Mayan art, but what you see in the Makwa Whittle is a recurrent symbol of warfare and divine power. This association further strengthens the connection between the weapon and Buluk Chaptan. There are also myths and legends. Although written texts about Mayan gods are limited, surviving fragments suggest Buluk Chaptan is a fierce warrior and defender. Now, this role aligns perfectly with the Makwa Whittles used in Mayan warfare. Therefore, while Buluk Chaptan's association with the Makwa Whittle is highly likely based on his role, symbolism, and the weapon's prevalence in Mayan culture, conclusive archaeological evidence remains elusive. Now, keeping the archaeological evidence aside, however, because this is a game that we're talking about, this is probably where the next installment of the God of War franchise could be heading. In fact, I made two videos on my other channel where I have spoken about this in a lot more detail, where I have specifically pointed out the reasons as to why I personally believe that Kratos might be heading to the Mayan mythology first. Now, there may be other mythologies as well. That's why I said Mayan mythology first. And do check out those videos of mine. I'll link them in the description box below. So feel free to check them out whenever you want to. But I again strongly believe that the next installment of the God of War franchise is going to take us to the Mayan pantheon of gods. So that's what I believe. The third time you battle Tyr, Tyr's fighting style takes an unexpected turn with the dual-wielded Khopesh. Now, this is a sickle-shaped sword with roots in ancient Egyptian battle axes. This was once the ubiquitous weapon of pharaohs and gods. These formidable blades helped forge empires and grace countless tombs. And Tyr calls the Khopesh his cherished weapon, and its significance whispers of forgotten tales. The sword's name, meaning leg, echoes a possible connection to Garm, the wolf who took his arm. Could an encounter with Anubis, the Egyptian jackal-headed god of death, also be associated with the Khopesh? And could it have cost Tyr a leg as well? Now, the shared wolf theme and Anubis connection to resurrection intrigue deeply. This intriguing possibility could explain Tyr's presence in Valhalla despite Mimir's unawareness of his death. Perhaps in a forgotten clash, Anubis revived Tyr after a fatal encounter, weaving a complex web of technicalities and hidden paths. Further fueling the mystique are the Khopesh's power. When wielded by Tyr, they plunge the arena into darkness, leaving only isolated shards of light. Could Ra, the Egyptian sun god have imbued these blades with their shadow dancing abilities? The Khopesh is more than just a weapon, it's a whispered chronicle of Tyr's past, hinting at lost chapters and legendary encounters. Their presence opens doors to thrilling possibilities, urging us to unravel the enigmatic tapestry of the Ghost of Sparta's journey. Now, a few more points that I want to talk about when it comes to the Khopesh would be that Horus was commonly depicted wielding the Khopesh in ancient Egyptian art. His association with this curved sword is well documented and appears throughout his myths and iconography. Here's why. Now, there are many depictions, like numerous statues, paintings, and reliefs, which show Horus brandishing the Khopesh. He's often depicted, in fact, in a fighting stance, holding the weapon with one hand or both, ready to strike his enemies down. There's also symbolic meaning attached to it. The Khopesh represented power, kingship, and victory in ancient Egypt. These qualities perfectly align with Horus's role as the falcon god, the protector of Pharaoh and symbol of the sky and light. In the various myths and legends, we have the Khopesh playing a critical role in his battles against Set, his evil uncle. Famous tales include Horus using the weapon to regain his lost eye and restore order to the cosmos. Additionally, the hieroglyph for king in ancient Egypt incorporates the Khopesh's shape, further highlighting its connection to authority and power. Horus is sometimes depicted with other weapons like spears and shields, but the Khopesh remains his signature weapon and the most visually associated with him. Therefore, it's safe to say that Horus was definitely a wielder of the Khopesh, and his association with this iconic sword is deeply ingrained in ancient Egyptian mythology and art. Now, so far, we've had three weapons, which was the shield and the spear used by Tyr, the god of war from Norse mythology, the Makwa which was used by the Mayan god of war, and finally we had Khopesh, which was used by Horus, the Egyptian god of war. So, 3 out of 3 weapons being used as their main choice of weapon, you could say, by the gods of war from these various mythologies. Which brings me to the very last weapon that Tyr uses. But this is one of those weapons which is surprisingly not used by any Asian god of war. Because if you look at the Chinese god of war, then the Chinese god of war used a weapon called Guandao. And this is definitely not a Guandao, because Guandao was a straight sword and not a sword which was shaped like a katana. Which brings me to the last weapon, which is katana. And this is the weapon which kind of confuses me, because this choice of weapon was very different to the previous 3 weapons which were used by all the different gods of war. But the katana is not used by the Chinese or the Japanese god of war. And first of all, I believe that this is the Japanese mythology that Kratos would be traveling to. Why? I'll get to that in a short while I finally bring all the elements together and try to explain why I think that it's the Japanese mythology and not any other Asian mythology. But let's start with the weapon, alright? So here we see that Tyr is using a katana. Now, it's possible that Tyr's journey across realms and pantheons leaves its mark not just on his spirit, but on his arsenal. And his final weapon in his battle against Kratos here, is a long curved katana. Whispers of his time in the land of the rising sun, probably. This is more than just a blade, because the katana in Japanese culture is a work of art, a symbol of tradition and unwavering spirit. Tyr's katana, gleaming and sharp, could be any among the countless forged in the fires of the Japanese history. Or perhaps, a legend whispers, it could be the Kusanagi no Tsurugi itself, one of the 3 sacred treasures of Japan. Found within the slain 8-headed serpent Yamata no Orochi The blade symbolized valor, a quality Tyr embodied in abundance as he traversed pantheons and realms. Did Tyr face the monstrous serpent himself, earning the blade as a trophy of his victory? Or did he inherit it from a fallen warrior, another chapter in his saga across realms? The whispers of possibility linger, hinting at tales yet untold, at pantheons waiting to be explored in the tapestry of Tyr's journey. As to which god wielded this katana? Well, we have Amaterasu, which is the Japanese sun goddess, who is traditionally depicted wielding the Kusanagi sword. The sword, like I said, is one of the three imperial regalia of Japan, and it is said to have been presented to Amaterasu by her brother, the storm god Susanoo. The Kusanagi sword is a legendary blade that is said to have magical powers. It is said to be able to cut through anything, and it is also said to have the power to purify and to protect. Amaterasu is often depicted holding the sword in her right hand, and it is said to be a symbol of her power and authority. In some interpretations of the myth, Amaterasu is said to have wielded the sword to slay the eight-headed serpent Yamata no Orochi. In other interpretations, she is said to have used the sword to slay a giant spider. In either case, the sword is a symbol of Amaterasu's victory over evil and her protection of her people. Now, there are some specific examples of Amaterasu being depicted with the Kusanagi sword. In the Kojiki, the oldest Japanese historical chronicle, Amaterasu is depicted holding the sword in her right hand as she ascends to heaven. In the Nihon Shoki, another Japanese historical chronicle, Amaterasu is depicted holding the sword in her right hand as she defeats the eight-headed serpent Yamata no Orochi. In the Ise-Gran Shrine, the most important Shinto shrine in Japan, Amaterasu is depicted holding the sword in her right hand as she is enshrined in the main hall. Therefore, it is clear that Amaterasu is traditionally depicted wielding the Kusanagi sword. The sword is a symbol of her power, authority, and protection, and it is one of the most important objects in Japanese mythology. But this is why I was actually confused with the last weapon that Tyr uses, because unlike the previous few weapons which were wielded by gods of war, Amaterasu is not necessarily a god of war. In fact, she is the only god here who is a female, and she's a female goddess, in fact, a sun goddess. So it's interesting because she's not a god of war from the Japanese mythology or the Chinese mythology. But here is why I strongly feel that it is the Japanese mythology where Kratos might be heading in the end. And I think the weapons that Tyr chose is the exact order that we may see Kratos traveling to these various lands. So first we had the Norse mythology, shield and the spear, used by Tyr. By the way, it rhymes as well. Then we had the Makwa. So I think the next mythology would be the Mayan mythology. The third weapon was Khopesh, and I know a lot of people wanted Kratos to go over to Egypt next. But I again strongly believe that the Mayan mythology will come before the Egyptian mythology, and after the Mayan mythology, Kratos may travel to the land of Egypt, where we see Khopesh that was used by Tyr. And lastly, we have the katana. And the katana obviously belongs to Japan. Now, the reason why I say the last destination might be Japan is because in the very first game, you had Kratos and Atreus who come to this place, and they have a lot of these murals. On one such mural, you had Tyr traveling to these various lands. So obviously we had a ship here that was depicted in this mural very clearly. I may put up the mural as I speak about it so that you can also understand where I'm coming from. So there was this Nordic ship that Tyr used to travel, and then he went over to the Greek lands. So you had the past, which was the Greek mythology, the Nordics, the present, because God of War Ragnarok. And then you had three other mythologies which were shown at the bottom. One was definitely the Egyptian mythology, one were the Mayans on the far right, and in the middle there was the Japanese mythology. So this mural had already planned how the next installments would actually shape up. In fact, they had given us this big hint in one of these murals. And I think the battle with Tyr, or rather the four battles that you have with Tyr in the Valhalla DLC, kind of seals the deal for me personally. So, again, I did make a video where I had stated that Kratos will definitely travel and battle against the Mayan pantheon of gods. So I still think that I'm right on track because that's where Kratos might be heading next. But there's more because there's also the Egyptian mythology that he may travel to, and then there is also a Japanese mythology that he may visit. And who knows, along his journeys, he might again come across Atreus. Because I think the other thing that um, will happen in the next installment is that we won't have Kratos partnering up with Atreus, but in fact, I think he would start the journey either alone or he will definitely have Freya by his side. So instead of Atreus, we may have Freya who accompanies our hero in the next installment. And somewhere down the line, they may actually come across Atreus again. But it's Kratos and Freya's journey, I believe, is what's gonna happen in the next few installments. Of course, Mimir is gonna be there, there's no doubt about it. He is always gonna tag along, but Atreus is not gonna be a central character. He might appear um, in a few places, or we may even have some kind of a DLC where we focus on Atreus's journey and his story, because his story is also very interesting. Um, it's very interesting because there's still that mystery surrounding what's behind that opening that we saw in the God of War Ragnarok game, where he chose not to delve deeper into that mystery with Odin. So that mystery, it's still lingering. But hey, let me know what are your thoughts about this video that I made. Do you think I'm right when it comes to the various mythologies that Kratos is about to visit? And let me know if you think that I'm right about the Mayan mythology, at least, because I've now made, like, this is the third video that I'm actually making about Kratos traveling and battling against the Mayan pantheon of gods. I strongly believe that's going to be the next installment. Let me know what are your thoughts about that, and also about the other mythologies like the Egyptian or the Japanese mythology. And do you think there are going to be other mythologies as well, like maybe Asia, more from Asia, like India or China? Indian mythology is very interesting as well, and it would be great to see Kratos um, coming across the various Indian gods, because Indian mythology is very, very interesting. And for somebody who is from India, it's gonna be really great for me, and it's gonna, you could say, really scratch that itch where I would want to see Kratos going up against the various gods from the Indian mythology. But hey, let me know what you guys think about the other mythologies, and if there are any other mythologies that are out there that you think is going to be included in the next few installments, do let me know in the comments section. Now, before I go, it would take just a click of a button for you to hit that subscribe, like button, and also that bell icon, but it would mean a lot to me because it helps my channel grow. So I would request you to kindly hit that like, subscribe, and also that bell icon in case you want to get notified with all my latest videos. Now, with that said, it's a wrap for this one, and I'll see you lovely folks in my next video. Until that time, I'll say take care, stay safe, and may God bless you all.